While the room is filling up, I will get us started. I'm Andrew Smith. I am the Senior Community Engagement Manager here at Dbsa, and I would like to welcome you all to our presentation about elections and voting and why that matters for mental health in general and for your individual mental health as a voter. Today we have Eric Scharf, Dbsa's Federal Advocacy Advisor, Brandon Graham, NAMI Director of Advocacy, and Angela Kimball with Inseparable, and she's the Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Public Policy. You can place any questions you have for our presenters into the chat, and we'll reserve some time at the end for Q&A. I will go back and read your questions to the presenters. If you have any questions that I can answer on the fly in the chat, I will also do my best to do that. And with that, I will hand it over to Eric.
Thank you. It's great to be here, folks. We have an agenda today that's going to include a review of our public policy priorities for Dbsa. We're then going to hear from NAMI about their voter education program, and then also from Inseparable about work they're doing to engage candidates into the political process and awareness of mental health issues. So I think it's going to be a really interesting program. We're going to look forward to hearing some dialogue from the participants here about their interest in the elections coming up. So, in our next slide, you will see a couple, there's a quote here, but also Andrew's going to put into the chat box a link to this really interesting article that was about how our mental health is affected by our voting, and how it's important to make those of us who live with a mental health condition to feel heard. It helps us to make that we're seeing a difference and really be validating, and also to see that our choices and candidates really make a difference and matter. I think we've seen certainly over the last few years how the interest in mental health issues has increased for a variety of different reasons, but that we are going to need to be working to increase the awareness of the policymakers, the elected policymakers around these issues. With that, I want to talk just a bit about what our public policy priorities are for Dbsa, because these are the kinds of things that we're going to be asking candidates at the federal and state level to really take an interest in. So first is access to peer services. That includes things such as peer support groups, the workforce, and reimbursement for peer support workers. Access to mental health, such issues as mental health parity, the network adequacy concerns, and telehealth issues. And then just improving the overall mental health care system. So right now we're doing a lot of focus on 988 implementation and crisis program expansion, mental health equity issues, and ongoing response to the COVID pandemic. NAMI and Inseparable and the many other great organizations we work with share many of these concerns. I'm sure they'll touch on some of the other issues they're working on as we move forward. So with that, I want to turn it over to Brandon and hear about a really incredible piece of work that NAMI is doing around helping you learn how to be a voter in this process. So Brandon.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon Graham. I use he, him pronouns. I'm NAMI's Director of Advocacy. And in this role, I get to do a whole lot of things, but the big thing that I just enjoy this time around is our Vote for Mental Health campaign. I'm going to explain more about what Vote for Mental Health means and just all of the resources we have available for folks out across the country. But first, I just want to share a little bit about why NAMI engages during the elections. And this is not just broad on NAMI. This is really big on just community organizations at large. It's because we're all uniquely positioned to reach people who are left out of the traditional political process. Before I joined NAMI, I worked in the political campaign world. And my goal when I was working on those campaigns was to turn out people that I knew were going to vote and that were going to vote for my candidate. That's where the return on investment is. That's where people spend their time in the political world trying to engage those voters. But often those voters are not representative of the community at large, and specifically the mental health community at large. So by engaging in elections, both at NAMI or any community organization, Dbsa, Inseparable, we can get out and reach people who are traditionally left behind. And that's because we are trustworthy. We have personal relationships with people in the community. And speaking as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, we're very nonpartisan, which appeals to voters. So I just want to take a second to dive into some data from our colleagues at Nonprofit Vote. For some of you who have never heard of them, they are a nonprofit to help nonprofits engage in the elections. And they do this research to find out the impact of nonprofits engaging. And what they found, and there's some numbers up on the screen, that nonprofits are reaching a more diverse group of voters than the people we traditionally think as likely voters. In fact, outreach from nonprofits turns out voters 11 percentage points higher than comparable voters. And I'm not going to read all of the upcoming slides, but I just want to show you a few pieces of data. As you can see, just the impact of this nonprofit engagement by race and ethnicity. Next slide, please. Age, really engaging younger voters, income, education, and propensity. I'm going to take a moment, though, to go into this slide a bit. Propensity, as you may see the note at the bottom, is that metric that is your likelihood to vote. It's based on whether you voted in past elections, and a bunch of other factors. But when we think about voting in past elections, there are plenty of reasons why people are unable to vote in an election. Election day isn't a national holiday. Until the last few elections, there haven't been as many opportunities to vote early or vote by mail that there are now for people who may have conflicts during the workday on a Tuesday in November to go and vote. Or something's come up, they can't find childcare. There are all these different reasons why people who are engaged by nonprofits may not vote. But when a nonprofit does this type of elections engagement work, why NAMI cares so much about elections is you see that giant jump in people who are considered by the traditional campaign industry as low propensity voters. They go to the polls 18 percentage points higher than if they weren't contacted by nonprofits. So why vote for mental health? Well, at a very baseline, the people we elect at all levels of government, from president and Congress to our city council and our school boards, are making decisions that impact the availability of mental health services and supports in all of our communities. So we want, as part of Vote for Mental Health, to help every voter understand the impact they have when they go and cast their ballot, because whether they know it or not, they are voting on mental health in every election. Vote for Mental Health is a completely nonpartisan campaign. NAMI, as a 501c3 organization, will never tell anyone what party or candidate to vote for. But we want people to understand the power that voting has. And before we jump forward a few slides, I just want to share some information that is breaking as of yesterday. NAMI conducted with our polling firm Ipsos a survey of 3,000 US adults, a larger than usual sample size, to gauge people's thoughts about mental health in the elections. And we broke down that data into an even smaller group, but still large enough to be statistically significant, of people who are likely to vote, are certain to vote in this election or already voted, since early voting has started in some states. I know I've already cast my ballot in the 2022 elections. And among those certain voters, 2 out of 3 believe that they can make a difference in their community for mental health by voting in this election. And we also found that 7 in 10 certain voters are more likely to support a candidate who supports increasing health insurance cover, improving health insurance coverage so that covers more mental health services, expanding access to quality, affordable mental health care regardless of income, and increasing funding for mental health care and mental health services. And more than half of certain voters are more likely to support a candidate who improves mental health care specifically for people of color and LGBTQ youth. This just shows that mental health, whether or not you hear all of these other campaign issues that are out there, mental health is a driver of people's votes because people care. This is something affecting people, and people want to see candidates talking about it. People want to see a national improvement across the board of mental health. And how do we do it? We do it by voting. So there's a quick video here. It's 45 seconds. Would love to show it. Andrew, I was not able to embed it because it is slightly too large for the PowerPoint, but if you click on the background, it should link to, the button is fake. The button I made behind the curtain, but if you click on the image there, it should open up for folks.
Sorry about that. I had to get sound and get the video up. Hopefully you all can see the video full screen now.
Do not have sound.
Oh. Let's see. We'll try one more time. Hopefully we'll have sound this time.
Thanks for showing that, Andrew. And thanks everyone for bearing with us as we got that up. I love showing that video because I do this for a living, and that gets me fired up every time and ready to go vote. And I hope that you all are ready to hear just a bit more about ways you can get involved and vote for mental health in 2022. And that video is available on YouTube. If anyone would like to share it out, we'll share a bit more details about ways you can share things and resources we have available for voters. But the first way you can get involved to vote for mental health in 2022, take the pledge to vote for mental health. Voteformentalhealth.com is our central campaign hub for all things elections this year. You can go there to find all of the resources. I dropped the link here in the chat. This is our main place for you to go and just find great resources that we're going to go through today. But the first call to action, the main call to action we have as part of this campaign is to pledge to vote for mental health. That does not commit you to voting for anyone in particular, Rather, it is a commitment that we all make to understand that power and that impact we can have for all people affected by mental health conditions. The great thing when you take that pledge is you will be signed up for election reminders. They're nonpartisan election reminders. You will receive just great information before some key dates and deadlines in your state. Next, it's important to learn more about, to ensure you're ready to vote this year. Back one slide, please, Andrew. For the first time ever, NAMI has been doing Vote for Mental Health and campaign elections engagement work for years, but for the first time, we are directly doing voter engagement on our page. If you visit voteformentalhealth.org/resources, you can find a form to register to vote. If a lot of state deadlines have passed in the last week, or are approaching next week. So please check the key dates at the bottom of the page for your state. That being said, if you haven't registered or you want to make sure you're registered for the next election, be sure to register there. You can update and check your voter registration. You can request an absentee ballot. You can find your ballot information, as well as more information from partners. So we partnered with Rock the Vote to host these resources this year. That's a great partnership that we have to make sure that we can do this direct voter engagement. But we are also partners with Vote Early Day, a civic holiday that is celebrated October 28th. To ensure people can vote early. And we'll talk more about voting early in a second, but you can find your state's voting options there, as well as from our other partners at Vote Riders, whether or not there's a voter ID requirement in your state and how you can make sure to navigate that. So a lot of great information on that page. Highly recommend visiting there. So you took the pledge. You're ready to vote. You've got your voter registration. Now it's important to learn more about how key campaign issues intersect with mental health. When you hear polls, when you hear candidates talk, it's healthcare, it's jobs in the economy, it's education, it's housing. Well, as we all know as mental health advocates, that impacts people with mental health conditions. Those key campaign issues intersect with mental health. If you want to learn more about how some of these key campaign issues intersect, or you want to help educate your friends and family about this impact, visit voteformentalhealth.org/key-issues. It's also along the top banner. It's just good to understand how all of these issues intersect. And when you know how they intersect, it's time to engage and learn about candidates. I'll let Angela talk a whole bunch more about the work Inseparable is doing here, but it's just important for all of us to understand as voters how candidates actually matter. We have some educational information on the page about just how different levels of government, your federal government, your state government, your local government, are making decisions and what those decisions are about, as well as just tips for you to engage in a very nonpartisan way with folks. Make sure you're following candidates on social media, doing your research, asking questions at local events, coffees, different forums that are being on, just staying in the loop and doing your research and getting engaged. So you've done your research, you've been engaging candidates, you tick the pledge. Well, part of what makes Vote for Mental Health so powerful, and what makes the entire mental health movement so powerful, is the fact that anyone can vote for mental health. Anyone can be affected. 1 in 5 people live with a mental health condition, but really all of us are impacted. So we want to spread awareness about why we're voting for mental health and encourage others to do so. So we have a page, voteformentalhealth.org/whyivote, where you have 2 different ways to get involved and share. One is I'm blank and I vote for mental health. This is the lowest barrier way to engage. Why? Because that blank can be anything that brings you to this movement. I'm Brandon and I vote for mental health. I'm an advocate and I vote for mental health. I'm a family member, I'm a peer, I'm a veteran, so on and so on, and I vote for mental health. We have some pre-filled graphics that you can share, but also we have printable signs where you can use your own handwriting, print it out, take a picture. We would love to have those pictures up on the gallery on our website. So please do consider sharing those with us. But also, if you want to share more, you can use I vote for mental health because. This is a conversation starter, not only with you printing out a sign, tweeting it out, posting it on Facebook or Instagram, but it's also a way to start that conversation with your friends and family when you're encouraging them. I vote for mental health because I know we do not have enough mental health professionals in our community to meet the need, and I want elected officials to make mental health a priority. Will you join me? Visit voteformentalhealth.org/whyIvote to get involved. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Andrew to walk through, because I would love if folks joining us today could actually do this live and share a bit about why you vote for mental health. So Andrew.
All right, thanks. Let me bring that back up and share again. I had to stop sharing because YouTube continued to play videos while I was on mute and trying to listen to Brandon the whole time. So thanks for bearing with us. If you know how to use a QR code, you can go ahead and scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. If you would prefer to use a different device, you can navigate to slido.com. slido.com. And if you choose to navigate to slido.com, either on your computer or your tablet, you will arrive at a screen that looks like this one. And in that blue box at the top where it says joining as a participant, you're going to enter the word elections. And either way, if you use the QR code or if you go to slido.com, slido.com, and enter elections in the blue box at the top of the screen that you see here, where it says joining as a participant, that will bring you to our Slido question. There's that QR code again if you want to scan it now if you missed it the first time around, or again, the instructions to join at slido.com and enter the code elections. And we just want to ask you to finish this sentence. I vote for mental health because. So we'll give you all a moment to enter some of the reasons that you vote for mental health.
See all the typing, Andrew. This is really exciting to see.
Yeah.
I really appreciate folks putting these answers in here, because I think this just shows that we all bring something different to our approach to elections and mental health. But the more we share why we vote for mental health, the more others listen, the more our friends and family listen and get involved, the more our elected officials listen once they become elected officials. We need to engage people early. We need to engage them often in our lived experience, our stories, our opinions on all of this policy. That's what makes this powerful. We have an advocate training program created by someone else who will be speaking momentarily that has a line that I am going to share. It's facts support, but stories move. And the same thing applies when it comes to elections engagement. So how can you get involved? There are a lot of different available resources we have out there. There are a lot of URLs. All of these are available on the URL I dropped in the chat, voteformentalhealth.org. We have our refreshed website that we launched a few months ago, that has all of this information. We have voter engagement tools that I discussed. If you need to check your registration, if you want to take the pledge and sign up for elections reminders, you want to do any of that, you can access the video that we showed today. That is right available on our homepage. The I Vote for Mental Health Because is all available at Why I Vote. Additionally, when you are on that page, there are template social media posts. There are buttons where it will pre-fill a tweet for you, and you just need to quickly enter in your information and it will share it straight out from your profile. And we have a lot of great refresh, but also evergreen resources. We have social media kits for voters and organizations. We have graphics, we have one-pagers. If you are a nonprofit leader, we have additional resources on there too if you're considering doing candidate engagement as a 501c3, or you just want to know the rules of the road when it comes to engaging in elections responsibly under the IRS rules. All of that is on the page. So please go explore, and I appreciate everyone's time today. I believe that is my last slide, so I can pass it over to Angela.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Welcome, everybody. I am Angela Kimball. I am the Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Public Policy at Inseparable. And I know you all know Dbsa and are familiar with NAMI, but Inseparable is new on the scene. So I want to explain that Inseparable is a growing movement working to advance policy solutions that reflect the belief that the health of our minds cannot be separate from the health of our bodies. Inseparable has three main priorities. We're focused on closing the treatment gap for the over 26 million Americans who aren't getting the help they need, getting youth help early, especially through school mental health, and finally, improving crisis response services. Now, Inseparable brings a campaign mindset to mental health advocacy, and we have both a C3 and a C4 structure that allows more direct action. You've heard Brandon talk about NAMI being a 501c3, which many nonprofits are. And NAMI brings a very sophisticated and thoughtful approach to voter education and engagement with its hashtag Vote for Mental Health campaign. And the reason they're focused on voter education and engagement is because 501c3 nonprofits are limited in their ability to engage in election-related activities. So Inseparable is using our 501c4 arm to complement NAMI's work with a new component, our Mental Health Now campaign. So I want to mention a quote from one of our advisory board members, former Representative Patrick Kennedy, who really inspired this campaign by saying, if we want elected officials to take bold action on mental health, we have to get candidates talking about our issues before they're elected. Next slide. And so we created the Mental Health Now campaign with three goals in mind. First, we really want candidates to sign a statement of support for mental health goals. We want to encourage voters to ask candidates to sign the statement. And finally, we want to increase the dialogue about mental health during elections. Next slide. So what is that statement of support? Very simply, it asks candidates and elected leaders to work to increase the availability of mental health care for everyone in need, promote wellness and early intervention by expanding youth mental health services, and to improve crisis response for anyone experiencing a mental health emergency. That's it. It's nonpartisan and it's intentionally broad. We don't tell candidates how to achieve these shared goals. Instead, we leave room for candidates and voters to share their ideas. Now, you'll see from this slide, we launched just this past Tuesday, and the slide says we already have more than 340 candidates and elected leaders who have signed on. And actually, as of this morning, it's over 390 candidates, 38 states across the aisle in offices ranging from local to state to national. And I'd just like to mention some of the headliners. So we've had Colorado Senator Michael Bennet sign on, Illinois Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, Pennsylvania Senate candidate John Fetterman, Governor Pritzker in Illinois, Governor Sisolak in Nevada, Governor Whitmer in Michigan, Governor Lujan Grisham in New Mexico, and Governor Evers in Wisconsin, and the Arizona candidate for governor, Katie Hobbs, amongst many others. So it's very encouraging so far. And next slide. We have provided candidates who signed the statement of support with talking points, with state-specific facts and social media posts to help them speak up about mental health. Next slide. But really, the biggest impact comes from all of you. As voters, as constituents of elected leaders, your voice really does matter. And the real power of Mental Health Now is when voters use it as a tool and ask candidates to sign the statement of support. And it's really easy. You can reach out to candidates on social media or at events or via email and ask them to sign the statement of support at mentalhealthnow.us. Next slide. And I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you to please don't forget your friends, family, neighbors, and colleagues, and letting them know that they can look up candidates on mentalhealthnow.us by state. There's a nationwide map. You can click on your state and see who has signed the statement of support. And as Representative Kennedy aptly intoned, if we want elected leaders to take bold action on mental health, we need to make it a priority with candidates and in our voting. So thank you for your time today. It's been an honor to share the stage with Brandon and Eric and have this important discussion about elections.
Thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you for helping me monitor the chat, Eric. I don't see any outstanding questions in the chat, but if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat now, or if you prefer, you can raise your hand and we can call on you and unmute you.
As we wait for that, I want to ask Brandon, what kind of response are you hearing from folks about this? Are people in your orbit and other organizations, and going into the next less than 30 days, how do you see this coming along?
Yeah, so great question, Eric. We've had a really good response as we usually do. So NAMI, while we do voter engagement every year, because there are elections every year, our big pushes and our updated resources, those all happen on the more conventional election years. So in 2020, we had a great opportunity to revamp Vote for Mental Health, make it more voter focused, make sure we put a lot of legwork into just assembling a campaign that was very professionalized, had a lot of resources available for people. For 2022, we're seeing that pay dividends because our field. So for those who are not aware, NAMI has 49 state organizations, including Washington, D.C., over 600 affiliates. We are quite vast when it comes to having nonprofits, but they're all their own nonprofits. So a lot of what we do for Vote for Mental Health, in addition to the voter engagement, is to just spread resources out throughout our alliance to make sure that people in their local community are hearing from their local NAMIs. And so far, we've seen a really great uptake in resources being shared by our affiliates and our state organizations. In 2020, we launched a recognition program for NAMIs that went above and beyond, called our Vote for Mental Health All-Stars program. We are already, we only relaunched the campaign a few weeks ago. We've already had 4 NAMI organizations really go above and beyond to engage in National Voter Registration Day, which was on the 20th of September. Get ready for Vote Early Day, which again, a shout out to everyone. If you have an opportunity to vote early, consider voting early on October 28th if it is available. That is a big push holiday. So we're hearing a lot of great things. A lot of great engagement, and I personally spend a whole lot of time on Twitter. So if you are engaging in Vote for Mental Health in your community, or you would like to just share it on your social network, please use the hashtag Vote for Mental Health. It's in the campaign name, but I'll also see it. There's a chance we'll promote it from NAMI Advocacy, our advocacy Twitter handle. So please get involved. I love seeing all the pictures people are sharing out there, and just it's exciting that we have an opportunity to really make mental health a priority.
Great, great. I know we'll be looking forward to working with our Dbsa communications team to push this information out as well. I see a couple questions in the chat box. So first one, I ask Angela, how can we use this pledge as a way to hold candidates accountable? At what point is it appropriate to go back to your candidate and say, hey, you signed the pledge, what are you doing now? Can you say a little bit about how we can do that?
Sure, and absolutely, Eric. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's an opportunity to go back and say, you did sign this statement of support. Now we'd like to see, what are you getting over the finish line that's going to help us in the community get the kind of mental health care that we need and deserve. And frankly, that's something that candidates need to hear. And when they're elected to office, that's time when, the proof is in the pudding. They need to put up and show that they're able to move legislation that's going to actually improve that mental health care in our communities.
Great. Is your campaign focused just at the federal level candidates, or does it also go to state elected candidates? Well, I know governors I saw on that, but what about city councils and that sort of thing? Or is that something that someone on local level could just take and use on the local?
This is a great question. It goes up and down the ballot. So at every single level, there is an opportunity for people to sign the statement of support. And I think that goes back to something Brandon pointed out, and that is at every level of government, from a local elected sheriff to the president of the United States, members of Congress, county commissioners, everybody has a role that somehow impacts issues that are important to people who live with mental health conditions or who care about somebody who does. And so that makes us really valuable, because voters can actually ask any candidate at any level to sign that statement of support and reflect upon how does their office intersect with people who live with mental health conditions.
Right, right. And I would just say, I would encourage people as we get into these final days, if you are someplace where a candidate is there. I was recently on the train platform, and there was a candidate there for a state senate position, talking to folks. Don't be shy. Go right up to them and say, hey, this is my concern, and have that conversation with them, and use those opportunities as you find them. Andrew, do you want to ask a couple of questions that are showing up in the chat box?
Yeah, and I will throw this out to the group and see who wants to take a stab. Do you have any examples of issues on the ballot this year that directly impact the mental health community?
That is a great question, and I'm going to answer it in both a direct and vague way, as I tend to do when it comes to elections things. The vague answer first. So I know it seems amorphous, but really we have candidates out there at all levels of government who are talking about just the economy at large, right? We're hearing about inflation. We're hearing about just employment. Are we reaching full employment? The R recession word that I will knock on wood here. Like, we're hearing all of these things. Now let's think back though. Last time we were in a big recession, we saw cuts to mental health care across the country. We saw budgets tightening. We saw people losing their health insurance. That's just one example of something that seems so broad, but is going to have direct impact. So hearing how people want to just approach the economy can have that domino effect to impacting mental health. Now to dig in a little more specific, I can't comment on some that I know all of the different ballot measures. There are some states that do put taxes that will support mental health care on the ballot. This isn't on the ballot quite yet, but there's some chatter about maybe King County, Washington next year having something on to support crisis services. That is a very direct thing to vote on. But when we're also thinking about it, even when we go into local elections, a lot of people locally have to vote on school funding measures. Do you want to support X school district for X bond measure? Like, these are things that also could help determine whether or not there are school mental health services available, or whether the budget needs to shrink at a school level because we need to make up money somewhere else. So while there are some things that are more direct, there are also things like the economy. There are things that Congress is eventually going to need to figure out what happens when the public health emergency ends, and we have a lot of people who gained coverage that may be at risk of losing it. Of course, that has been renewed, but will it be renewed forever? Probably not. So where do candidates stand on making sure people have coverage that covers mental health care and make sure they get the care they need? So there are a lot of different avenues here. I think that's why it's just so important to do that research, see how different candidates are talking about issues you care about in your community, and find just how those may impact mental health care locally for you.
Thank you. And our next question is really about the private sector with a touch on the regulatory side of things, but I'm interested to see if any of you can give us a legislative/elected approach to the answer. How can we get mental health providers to accept all insurances, including Medicare and Medicaid?
Well, Brandon eloquently answered the last question, so I'll try and take this on and let him jump in as he'd like. And I would say that it's very difficult because there isn't a way to force providers to take insurance. But elected officials at the congressional level and at the state level both play a role in Medicare and Medicaid. I'm not talking about commercial insurance here, but they also cover regulations that apply to commercial insurance plans as well. So when you elect people to Congress or to your state legislature, you don't necessarily get an answer to this question, but you get the opportunity to engage in that conversation with that elected official and to say, hey, as a constituent who really needs to access mental health care, I find that there aren't enough providers out there. I can't get one that accepts my insurance. What will you do to ensure that our state Medicaid program covers all the mental health providers out there, or enough to meet community needs? As a member of Congress, what are you going to do to make sure Medicare has adequate provider networks so that I can actually get the care that I'm paying for? Those are all questions that you can ask once you have somebody in office. And frankly, it's an important question to ask before people are elected to office. What will you do if elected to office to help ensure that everybody can get access to a provider regardless of their insurance? End of story.
I would jump in and say that as Angela has rightly said, this is a really tough issue from a policy perspective. I think that the more we can get reimbursement rates increased, that then will also attract more providers to the profession. I mean, we know, for instance, that the psychiatry profession has one of the lowest reimbursement rates, which is one of the reasons there's no incentive for young doctors to become psychiatrists. So the more we can work with folks, both in the public system and the private system, to bring that rate of compensation up, that will be one way to get them to have incentive to do that. Also, to simplify the way that people get reimbursed, because a lot of doctors won't do it because it's such a complicated system to do it. And so we can, again, work with policymakers both in the public and private sector to do that. But again, and there are some legislative incentives that could be done to help with that. So there are some, I think, long-term solutions there, but it's not going to be short-term as we approach this. So yeah.
But that question, Eric, also gets to something that you were talking about before with Angela. One of the questions you had, which was basically the election doesn't end. Our work doesn't end on November 8th. You can engage with candidates. You can raise that this is an issue that matters for you and people in your community, and you want to know more about it. And then they're elected, and you build relationships with that newly elected policymaker, and you continue building those relationships, because we send form emails, and I know we are advocacy and policy people. You know, we send out advocacy alerts. You all receive advocacy alerts. You take action. That is all incredibly powerful. But you know what the next step is? Relationship advocacy. How we are developing those relationships. How are we having conversations about reimbursement rates in a direct face-to-face way with people that we have been talking with since they were candidates. Now they are elected officials. Now they have a committee assignment. Now they have all of these things, and we have done that work. We've had those conversations, and we've built that up. And the last thing I'll say to add to this answer, because I know we're getting some more comments in the chat, I just see them popping up, is, and this isn't a technically considered elections for 501c3, so I can say this out loud, you also have states like South Dakota, which did not expand Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act. And there is a referendum on the ballot this year to expand Medicaid, the largest payer of mental health services in the country, to citizens who went without coverage in their state. That is only one state, that is only one instance right here, but just another tangible way of making sure that people are getting the care they need directly on people's ballots.
Great. I'll note one other thing around the accountability issue is as we move into the new congressional season next year, we will be working to have various pieces of legislation introduced, working with NAMI and Inseparable and all these groups. As an example, the Medicare peer bill that we're working on. One of the things we always need is more co-sponsors, and that's a way when we send out an advocacy alert, whether it comes from NAMI or MHA or us, contact your member of Congress and say, please show your support publicly by co-sponsoring this piece of legislation. So because the more co-sponsors we have, the more that tells other policymakers, oh, this is an issue I need to pay attention to. So I think that's an important way of encouraging folks to show their support.
And building on that, Eric, because I think that's a great example. If a candidate signs a statement of support, then there's an opportunity, especially if they're like a congressional candidate, to go back to them and say, you know, the organization I belong to, Dbsa, is supporting this piece of legislation because we want Medicare to cover peer support specialists. Will you co-sponsor it? We know you signed the statement of support. This is a tangible way you can make progress on the goals that you signed up for. See where that conversation takes you. And I have to say that Medicare has the worst record in terms of covering behavioral health services, you know, of practically any kind of health coverage, but we're making remarkable progress in Congress. And I think that is in large part because across the aisle, people are starting to really acknowledge the need for mental health care and understanding that Medicare was not built to provide mental health and substance use care. And it's going to cost a lot more to do it at this late stage in the game. And so members of Congress have to be willing to find the dollars to do that. But it's a real opportunity now. And this is a time to hold people's feet to the fire and ask them those questions.
Andrew, what's our next question?
That's it for now. But I'll give it just a moment, see if anyone else has any questions. You can also feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you. But I also just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of our presenters for sharing so much valuable information with us.
I did see a note from Jeff Fox about whether candidates can donate to help a C3 organization. Not sure I fully understand the question. Maybe Jeff might want to expound on that a bit more.
I can also take a crack at that.
Okay, yeah.
I will start with the preface that I give before all of the different compliance advice that I give. I am not a lawyer. This is based on my experience learning from other organizations about best practices for engaging in elections. My advice is, so this gets a little gray. I would suggest. Sorry, 501c3 stuff is always fun. Here's the thing, a candidate in their personal capacity can donate to a nonprofit. I'm just going to use a NAMI example because it's just easiest. NAMI has NAMI Walks events in the community. A candidate in their personal capacity could say, I am donating X number of money to NAMI. Great. The problem is when you as a 501c3 organization take steps that give the appearance, even if it's indirect, that you are endorsing said candidate. So if they are buying a sponsorship and they want to put their logo on a sign because that's how you list sponsors, that's where things start getting bad, because really the IRS rules around this are clear. You cannot engage in political activity. After that, it all becomes gray area, and it's all about the set of facts and circumstances around that engagement. So if you don't list people's names and this person just wants to get involved in the community, they care about mental health, they make a donation, that's a donation. Thank you for your donation. You're an individual. If they want a sponsorship or a speaking opportunity or an access that is just above and beyond what any is offered to any other candidates, that's where you start getting it's that hot water around 501c3 engagement.
Thank you.
That was
That answered my question.
Pardon?
That was Jeff
Sorry,
said we
Jeff.
answered his question.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay, great. I'm going to ask a question of the group, and Andrew, you might want to release the spotlight at this point so we can see everyone. I'm curious if people could say, if they feel comfortable, how do they feel about voting and how it impacts on their mental health? And how are they feeling about the current elections right now in terms of their mental health? You'd be curious to know how that's and how do these kinds of programs help you to be more engaged in the process? Yeah. Anyone willing to share that? It'd be interesting to hear that from folks. I see Jeff has his hand raised. Go ahead, Jeff. I think you can mute. Yeah, okay, yeah, you can mute yourself. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You hear the term mental health mentioned a lot, but there's nothing really specific that I hear from a lot of the candidates that are mentioning mental health, that how important it is for organizations like NAMI and Dbsa particularly. So that's kind of, I question, again, I think they're trying to attract a certain voter, but again, there's nothing specific that I ever see that they outline.
I'll let Angela, who's more the expert on this than me, I think part of the problem is that there's so many specific policies that they're working on that it's hard for them to generalize. But that is a frustrating. But Angela, maybe you got a thought on that. So.
Okay, so I'll just briefly mention that candidates are actually approached on a million different issues. And so when you think about the scope of what they have to deal with and what they're approached from, mental health becomes a smaller sliver of that pie. And really it's up to all of us as voters to say that we would like to see how are they going to achieve these goals of increasing access to mental health care for everyone. And that's actually why we made 3 kind of broad goals in the Mental Health Now campaign. So it would give room for candidates to propose different ways to get to the solution. Right. And you're right. During elections, candidates tend to be a little bit more vague. They don't want to be held too accountable. So often some of the details are missing. But again, this is part of, in a sense, generating energy and the sense that there is constituent demand for mental health care more than specific answers during the campaign.
Most specifically, I don't hear anything about suicide. And we have an epidemic in this country as far as suicide is concerned. And there's certain organizations that treat people. Dbsa is one, for instance. I'm very partial to Dbsa for this. But I never hear anybody mention anything. The numbers, the school children as far as suicide, I don't hear the name suicide or the word suicide mentioned in any campaigns.
And Jeff, I would say that it's frustrating, right? Like, we are all mental health advocates. We are here, we are advocating because we want to see things change. We know the data too well. We know the data is too tragic. We want to change that sad and tragic reality. I think we're making slow progress. Slow progress is frustrating. Slow progress is just, you want to sit and you want to yell sometimes because you just know that things can be better if we are hearing candidates and elected officials talking about this. In 2020, there was a coalition of mental health groups who surveyed presidential candidates. And I'll say I've read endless amounts of presidential candidate position pages and all of that. And for the first time, we saw people actually talking about mental health in the healthcare section of their position statements. As Angela said, they stay so broad sometimes because there are just so many different things, but to start seeing mental health show up on a dozen position statements from presidential candidates was unheard of in years past. And I even think back to the State of the Union this year, when the president mentioned mental health for the first time in, what was it, 20 years, 24 years, some odd, in one of the biggest addresses of the year. So I agree, Jeff. I need to hear more candidates talking about this. And that's why, Vote for Mental Health is just something that I really enjoy that we put out there, because I think it's going to move the needle far more than some other things when we, as voters, use our voices and our collective work to say, it's time you're talking about this because this matters. And the polling data that we released yesterday shows that people want to hear from candidates on these issues. And I think we can collectively make a difference. It's unfortunately far too slow, but we're slowly trending in the right direction.
One thing I've been struck with in the last few years is the number of candidates or members of Congress who are openly talking about their personal experience with mental health issues. I think it's just 2 or 3 off the top of my head who have been very public about their issues with depression. There was one just the other day who said, well, she's in therapy for a number of issues. So I think that's encouraging. I think, the more again we can lift up those kinds of individuals to show that, bring down that stigma. I will know. I think that suicide is a challenging issue for candidates to talk about because it can be so triggering for individuals. So that's a tough one. But Rachel, do you want to share something?
I would just like to say that how can we get to a point where we're seeing more of these statistics and seeing more information for the general public to get help, or like open-ended questions to see if you're really thinking of suicide or violence, or you're really needing providers to see someone. I was just thinking, I know the government's getting better about paying for commercials You see some very randomly, and of course they cost, but like you said, nonprofit organizations and state and local and your government help get those. And just to you know, a lot of people are sitting in front of the TV or radio or at work. You know, they work a lot, and just would like to see something that somebody reads, you know, and not just the law about, you know, call this number, you know, if you need help, you know, something that attracts their attention to help them think. I've seen some things in different providers' offices that were posters, and they were really, I wish I would take a picture of a couple of them. But you know, just something to open their mind, you know, before committing that violent act or taking their life, or you know, not having the funds to go see a provider. Know that you know, the 988 number will help you get there. But a lot of times, if you're not in crisis, they'll just talk with you, and then you have to do a lot of your research on your own to get help, and that's frustrating for a lot of them. And there's waiting lines here in North Carolina for providers, and that is either they're not taking patients, or you're on a waiting list, and you see more of the televisit, which is great. But for a lot of rural places, you don't have the means to be on a televisit still. And I live in one of those areas. It's just, I don't know how to speak. I would like to learn to know how to speak to my congressman and things. Maybe there's a website, and that will help me guide these issues, and adding some posters and things to work sites and things, instead of the little, you know, how you, I don't know about your state, but our state is, every business has to have this information center. And it's just basically like 3 posters about the law and things. And so I would like to add some things to that to help see people get more help. That's all I got.
Thanks,
Thank you for sharing that. And I will jump in and say it underscores the fact that it's often multiple issues related to each other, that we can push for expanded access to telehealth, that telehealth needs to be covered and it needs to be accepted. But to your point, if the people who need telehealth don't have access to broadband, then they're not going to be able to use telehealth. So then we need a separate issue, a separate bill to expand broadband access. And so, yeah, it all ties in together, and it's all advocacy. It all calls for the same legwork, which is meeting with your legislators, putting a face to an issue and saying, you know, hi, I'm Andrew, and this is how this issue is going to affect me. And you don't have to schedule separate meetings to talk about separate issues. When you get your 15 minutes, you can lay out your case for them of, we need expanded access to telehealth. Oh, and by the way, I also need you to push for expanded broadband access so that we can actually use the telehealth.
I would note that Dbsa, I know NAMI has these programs, other advocacy groups, about how to tell your story. Because for a lot of this effort, it's important, obviously, to be able to reference maybe some particular legislative issue. But it's just first being able to tell your story about why this is important to you is just breaks the ice with policymakers and those opportunities. And again, I say, look for those informal opportunities. You know, the time when the you remember Congress is at the state fair, and if you bump into them at the state fair, or the times that they're doing some sort of town hall. Unfortunately, they're doing fewer of them, but they're doing some sort of town hall event in your area. Same with your local city councils or county council members. There's lots of opportunities to interact with them one-on-one. I think the more you can develop those kinds of relationships and friendships with them, then they come to you as a trusted source of information. And again, if you don't have the details about the specific policy, you can always come back to Dbsa or another organization to get the details on the policy. So,
and I also would like to recommend that Dbsa, you know, I had to search to get help when I was dealing with my bipolar brother. And with, you know, some of my issues, I don't know, there needs to be like a first search engine for a free mental health care or something. There needs to be, you know, I don't know how you network things or tech things, you know, how can that pop on the screen to help people immediately? You know what I mean?
yeah, that's a tough one for all of us. Anyone else have any other thoughts about how they're approaching their election decisions? Be curious to hear if anyone's willing to share that. Or any concerns they have on their local level, or where we wrap up in the next few minutes.
While folks are thinking too, I would love to throw another question out to everyone. Just who has a plan to vote this year? Do you know when you're going to cast your ballot? Do you know where your polling place is? Do you know how you're going to get there, when you're going to get there, what the hours are in your state? We've talked a whole lot about the ways you can get engaged up until election day, but how are you going to go and cast your ballot? Do you have vote by mail in your state? Do you know where your drop boxes are if you do have vote by mail? What are those different ways? I'm just going to drop another website link in the chat. It's just a make a plan checklist to make sure that you can, you've got all of the different pieces in place to go and vote this year, because really, we can engage the candidates, we can have conversations, we can do a lot of this. Drop your ballot. Go Douglas, drop your ballot. I am an early voter as well. Thankfully, I am very lucky that my early voting place is right downstairs below my apartment. But yes, make your plan to vote, because we can have all the conversations, but unless we actually go and our votes are cast and everything is heard, we won't end up changing things the way we want to. So please make sure you know when to vote. Election day is the last day to cast a ballot, not the only day. So make your plan today.
I just wanted to encourage Rachel, if she didn't listen to some of the other summits or wasn't in some of the other summits, we've had this discussion because I brought it up specifically about how to approach my local mayor and local community issues. And I forget who it was about telling your story. And there's a lot of great summit things that happened this week where we learned specifically how to go about telling our story in order to impact change. So this has been really great to learn at the end of the summit. But if some of the other things she hasn't seen or anybody hasn't seen, I would encourage you to go back and watch them.
Yes, I agree. We've also been encouraging people to get engaged with their local mental health planning organizations, whether it's a state mental health board or a county mental health organization. These are opportunities where you can become your own policymaker. You can speak out in front of these groups and eventually even be appointed to various policymaking boards, and you have those great opportunities there. But again, these are then opportunities where testify at your local council meeting or your state legislative hearings, and that gets you an opportunity to be right in front of those decision makers, and again, then say, where are you at with your mental health policy? Great. It's a quiet crowd on a Friday afternoon, so if there's anyone else has anything else they'd like to share about their thoughts on the elections, the campaigns, whatever. Jen is saying, I'm new to a lot of this and how to speak out and advocate, but some has been helpful. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Well, thank you again to, oh, I see Angela has her hand up. Go ahead, Angela, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, I was going to say that back at the state legislative area, I would go to the Duval County and in Florida delegation meetings, and one speaker after another would come up and ask for money for their very worthwhile causes, they thought. And I would put in my card to request to speak, and I would go up and say, I'm not here to ask for money. And that immediately got all the delegates to stop and listen. And I said, I'm here for something more important than that. I want your time. I would like 15 minutes on your calendar to talk to you about what mental illness is and what it isn't, and how you in your position of power can help millions of Americans. And it was amazing that I got to speak personally with several of the state representatives that way because of just making the ask to speak. And then I got to send them materials as time would go on and got to know their legislative aides and developed a relationship by writing thank you notes every time I communicated with them. So I got kind of a personal level with the state policymakers, and I ended up going to some of the NAMI national meetings and got to speak to some of the aides and even one of the Congress people there because I had gotten an award from NAMI. So it was just, I found building relationships and writing thank you notes helped a lot.
Angela and Brandon must have recruited you for this workshop, but we're really glad that was happening. So that's excellent. Yeah, and that's a perfect example of how the process works. So that's really exciting. Yeah. I think, was there a question about whether these sessions are being posted? Andrew, do you want to say?
Yes, the sessions are being recorded, and I believe you can use the same link that you used today to enter and watch the session live. That where it said join, it'll say something to the effect of watch or view, and you'll be able to see the recordings of each of these meetings, including this one, and also going back. It's been mentioned, you know, that there's been a thread. We had a session devoted entirely to 988 policy. We did have a session put on by the Dbsa communications team about how you can tell your story effectively. So we definitely encourage everyone to go back and watch any that you may have missed. And with that, we are at time. So I want to thank all of our presenters again, as well as thanking everybody for participating and for asking questions and being a part of this process. And please, I'm going to put one more thing into the chat. If you would like to sign up for our advocacy communications, you can do that here. And I don't believe it's going to be a clickable link the way I'm putting it into the chat, but if you copy and paste that into your web browser, that will take you to where you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, as well as that's where we send out action alerts, letting you know when it's the opportune time to contact your elected officials. Those can be your senator or representative. They can also be at the state level. They can also be unelected on the regulatory side. If Medicare or Medicaid is considering a policy change and DBSA has something to say about it, and we want to raise our our voices together, we will send you the information about how you can contact them. We provide information that you can share. You can also edit that, insert your personal story, change it around however you want. But if you're feeling intimidated about how to even write a letter, we provide a basic letter that you can start with. So with that, thank you again to everyone. And please enjoy the rest of the summit. We have a couple more sessions today, and have a wonderful weekend.